The pair began singing at 11. They didn't talk for decades. Now we know why. Paul Simon wrote all the tunes while Art Garfunkel got all the praise. Simon did something unforgivable when he snapped. He launched their comeback record as a solo project without Garfunkel's voice. That wasn't the final straw. It was more private. Paul Simon was 11 when he saw Art Garfunkel sing in a fourth-grade talent contest at Public School 164. In Queens, in 1953, they lived a few blocks away in a largely Jewish neighborhood and met during a sixth-grade Alice in Wonderland performance 2 years later. The White Rabbit was Paul. Cheshire Cat Art. Paul seemed smart, humorous, and the most intriguing kid to Art. Love of music drew them together immediately. They spent hours listening to the radio, absorbing new rock and roll sounds. They soon created the Peptonies, a tiny street corner singing group with friends. They practiced harmonies to harmonize their voices. They began performing together at school occasions, creating the relationship that would make them renowned. Both were 15 when they recorded Hey Schoolgirl in 1957. They brought $25 to Sanders Recording Studio in Manhattan. Luck favored them. Music promoter Sid Prosen was impressed by them. Their parents let him sign the lads to Big Records, his indie label. They had fun when a famous DJ aired their music on the radio under the moniker Tom and Jerry. Inspired by the cartoon Hey, Schoolgirl reached the Billboard charts with over 100,000 sales. It even landed them on American Bandstand, a major thing back then. The initial spark didn't lead to permanent success. Their follow-up tracks failed, and excitement faded. It was a preview of what could be. Fame didn't start Simon and Garfunkel's complex relationship. Years earlier, a traumatic 1958 incident neither would forget started it. After graduating from Forest Hills High School, both opted to attend college in case their music dreams failed. Paul Simon studied English at Queens College, and Art Garfunkel studied architecture at Columbia before moving to art history. They were still contracted to large records as Tom and Jerry, with Garfunkel as Tom Graff and Simon as Jerry Landis. Simon did anything to spoil their friendship. He recorded and released a solo song under the pseudonym True Taylor without telling Garfunkel. True or False debuted secretly. After learning, Garfunkel felt deceived. Many years later, the betrayed feeling returned. Simon still felt the pain of Garfunkel's words. No matter what happens, I'll always be taller than you. Decades later. After years, the early 1960s American folk music culture motivated them to reconnect. Smooth pop was being supplanted by raw, emotive folk music. 5 years after their breakup, they quietly resumed performing in 1963. They hid their identities. Instead, they played modest Greenwich Village clubs like Goethe's Folk City as Cain and Gare. When famous African-American jazz musician and producer Tom Wilson saw them perform, everything changed. Wilson, who helped Bob Dylan transition from folk to rock, sensed something remarkable in them. He arranged a studio audition. The sad song Simon wrote in his bathroom, Silence, was played there. Turn out the lights and run the water for the perfect sound. To restart, they joined with Columbia Records under their true names. Timing was excellent. Simon's songwriting advanced as folk music became more political and poetic. Their debut album went poorly. Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. sold poorly in October 1964. Only 3,000 copies sold. The label misjudged the moment, calling it thrilling new folk sounds as the Beatles and other British artists were introducing electric guitars and rock rhythms. The album felt old-fashioned overnight, since most of the tracks weren't Simon originals. The setback drove Simon to England to find his footing as a solo artist. Garfunkel studied math at Columbia again. The end looked near. Even Simon recorded a solo album in London. They both moved on, or thought so. Then something odd happened. Boston and Florida college radio stations played the original Sound of Silence in spring 1965. Tom Wilson noticed. He remixed the song without consulting them. The original recording was enhanced with studio musicians' electric guitars, bass, and drums, but the track was rough. The session players had trouble keeping time because the original had tempo concerns. Engineer Roy Haley used echo effects to disguise the rhythmic irregularity. While performing in Denmark in September, Simon learnt the reworked song was climbing U.S. charts. He was appalled when he heard it. He considered it sloppy and awkward, but the people disagreed. After 14 weeks on the Billboard Top 100, the song peaked on January 1, 1966. Simon and Garfunkel gained fame overnight. Suddenly, they were forced to record Sounds of Silence, a new album, after an unexpected hit. Simon and Garfunkel released their third album, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme, in October 1966, a turning point for them. Billboard charted the album for nearly 3 years and sold over 3 million copies. For the first time, they employed an 8-track recording equipment to layer their vocals without Paul Simon's guitar noise. Although there were behind-the-scenes concerns, the sound was much more professional. Martin Carthy taught Simon the English folk song Scarborough Fair. The centuries-old song was only credited to Simon and Garfunkel. Another song, Cloudy, was composed with Seeker's Bruce Woodley. He was paid but not credited on the CD. The record was a hit despite it. The Grammy Hall of Fame inducted it years later, and Rolling Stone named it one of the finest albums ever. Simon and Garfunkel played at Monterey Pop Festival in June 1967. The Who, Janis Joplin, and Jimi Hendrix stole the stage at this cultural event. Simon and Garfunkel stood out by not smashing and burning instruments. Despite the turbulence and psychedelia, their sweet, intelligent sound reminded audiences of their folk roots. Some thought their music wasn't trendy enough, but their performance showed they still had a strong presence in the music scene. Something unforeseen changed their careers and film that year. Mike Nichols had a flash of inspiration while directing The Graduate. He preferred Simon and Garfunkel's tunes to a soundtrack. Early on, Paul Simon agreed to write 3 new film tunes, but touring interfered. Instead, the editor edited sequences using tunes like The Sound of Silence and Scarborough Fair. They kept the music because it suits. Movie and music boosted each other. The soundtrack topped the charts, vying with the Beatles. Simon penned one new song for the film, Mrs. Robinson, which won Record of the Year. Simon and Garfunkel gained a wider, older audience from the film, which's emotional center was their music. The use of popular music in movies will influence many directors in the future. Despite the triumph, cracks were appearing. Their collaboration was deteriorating. Paul Simon wrote all the songs and made most creative decisions, while Art Garfunkel sang. Simon later admitted feeling the unbalance. Garfunkel gave criticism in the control room during recording sessions, but Simon did most of the work. This caused animosity. Simon said he was jealous when fans cheered Garfunkel's singing On Bridge Over Troubled Water. He thought, I composed that song, but Garfunkel got the plaudits. They were frustrated from childhood. Simon recalls his mother saying, Paul, you have a good voice. Arthur has a good voice. It hurt. Tension developed over time. Although he didn't write the song, Garfunkel felt overshadowed. Simon felt creatively confined. Simon and Garfunkel prepared their farewell album in January 1969. Around the same time, Art Garfunkel made a life-changing decision. Both he and Paul Simon appeared in Mike Nichols' Catch-22. But Simon's role was unexpectedly eliminated from the script. Starring just Garfunkel, filming began in Guaymas, Mexico on January 13th. Simon remained in New York, heartbroken and alone. Director Charles Groton later labeled this their partnership's breaking point. You don't drop one of Simon and Garfunkel's parts, he said. Don't do that. Simon didn't only care about the film, it was about feeling abandoned by a longtime closest friend. Garfunkel revealed his intention when they spoke. After 6 months of filming, he recorded records. Simon didn't like that. As he revealed in the documentary in Restless Dreams, he told Garfunkel, "No way, I won't." In their music, Simon was already dominant. He wrote and recorded all the songs and shaped their tone. Garfunkel typically sung and gave control room input. Simon believed the collaboration had lost its balance. It got worse with this film. After 6 weeks, Garfunkel's film shoot took months. Bridge Over Troubled Water was Simon's attempt while in Mexico. But long-distance teamwork failed. Simon sent music. Garfunkel returned notes. Not the same. The whole thing felt weird. The delay forced Simon to finish parts of the album without Garfunkel. On some songs, Garfunkel barely appears. On others, no. The song The Only Living Boy in New York could be considered a goodbye message. Simon referenced their previous stage names when writing about Garfunkel. "Get your plane on time, Tom. Your portion will be okay. Fly to Mexico." That song showed Simon's loneliness and how far apart they'd gotten emotionally and physically. Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. Live performance always bothered Paul Simon. The crowd stood up and roared whenever Art Garfunkel sang the song's emotional high points. The clapping was loud and admiring, but just for Garfunkel. Every time Simon had a bitter thought, I penned that tune. Simon candidly describes how horrible such events were in the 2024 documentary In Restless Dreams. He gave Garfunkel the lead vocal because he thought his clean, choir-like voice was perfect. Still, it hurt. People praised the voice, not the composer or lyricist. Over time, those performances reminded him that he was the background writer, while Garfunkel was the star. Simon's frustration was familiar. It started in childhood. His mother said something that resonated with him forever. "Paul, your voice is good, but Arthur's is very good," she said. That single sentence hurt him deeply. He always felt second best. Every time critics or fans praised Garfunkel's voice, that statement returned. Simon witnessed Garfunkel earn more accolades than him as their celebrity grew in the late 1960s, when he wrote all their songs. That unbalance became unbearable. Garfunkel also struggled. He said in an interview that Paul Simon hindered him for most of his life. Garfunkel wanted to write music but felt overshadowed. He didn't try to contribute his tunes throughout their pair years since he didn't think they could compete with Simon's. He kept quiet about it for decades before writing and releasing his own material. He asks a challenging question in the documentary. Did he break up the group, or did Simon never accommodate Garfunkel's ambitions? He thought they were both responsible. Simon eventually admitted that their partnership was unequal. He wrote tunes and oversaw recording. He chose most of the guitar and drum sounds. Garfunkel gave his assent but rarely influenced the song from the control room with the producer. Things worsened during Bridge Over Troubled Water recording. Garfunkel left to star in Catch-22, which took longer than expected. Simon was upset when Garfunkel didn't finish the album. The delay, creative tension, and imbalance mounted up. In July 1970, Forest Hills Stadium in Queens, New York, saw a small but significant event. The final Paul Simon Art Garfunkel concert took place on stage. The crowd had no idea this night would end one of music's most adored marriages. The show was well done, but there was an odd missing sensation. Few words were spoken between songs. Their normal friendliness and jokes were gone. After the second night, they parted ways. No argument or public statement, simply a quiet, personal goodbye that seemed more like closing than slamming a door. Paul Simon later said they never discussed quitting the performance, just concluded. Years later, he stated there was no point in discussing it with Artie. That sentence alone is telling. Long before they stopped singing, their communication broke down. Maybe they both understood things couldn't continue as before. Perhaps silence was easier than expressing their feelings. They went their separate ways after the separation. Paul Simon plunged into solo work. He thrived, not simply survived. He released Paul Simon, There Goes Ryman Simon, and Still Crazy in the 1970s. We had new energy and ideas after all these years. Hits included Me and Julio, Down by the Schoolyard, and 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Simon was recognized as a powerful songwriter, not merely one of a brilliant duet. He continued his innovation and released Graceland in 1986, a mix of South African and his own music. The album sold millions and won several Grammys. It was successful and pioneering. However, Art Garfunkel struggled. His voice remained wonderful, but his solo music failed to catch on. He released several albums in the 1970s, but none matched what he and Simon composed. His music career slowed and became more fragmented. Fans still adored his voice, but he struggled to discover his own charm. He continued creating, but the spotlight moved on. Despite expectations, Garfunkel's acting career was successful. His Catch-22 and Carnal Knowledge performances were lauded. His acting was praised as natural and powerful. Many were astonished, including Simon, years later. Confessed being resentful at Garfunkel's fame. One biography quotes him saying that everyone said Artie had so much talent, feeling, and beauty. Simon's remarks rang with frustration. After all the songs they did together, his former singing partner was suddenly being praised for something else. Looking back, their breakup went beyond music. It revealed a deeper world event. Simon and Garfunkel's tunes shaped 1960s. Their music resonated with those seeking meaning, justice, and a better society. Music like The Sound of Silence was more than entertaining. They prompted thought. Growing Up was captured in their 1968 album Bookends, confronting the globe and wondering where it was going. A change-minded generation was shaped by their voices. By 1970, the world changed. The 60s protests, hope, and solidarity were fading. People were inward-looking. Big revolutions become personal journeys. The duo's final album, Bridge Over Troubled Water, was more than a record. Like saying farewell to one era and hello to another. The title track, Comforting and Sad, appeared to reflect the transformation. It topped the charts for years as society adjusted to a new sound and hope. In 1975, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel recorded My Little Town after their harsh 1970 separation. The song was their first significant collaboration after splitting up. However, they recorded it independently and released it on their respective albums. Song did nicely. It peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and topped Adult Contemporary for 2 weeks. Still, the reunion felt more like a commercial maneuver than a genuine comeback. Simon told Garfunkel he was singing too many nice songs and wrote the song to be edgier. After performing it on Saturday Night Live, they resumed their careers. While Simon's album earned a Grammy, their brief reunion didn't mend old scars. It only highlighted their differences. Later, in 1981, they tried again. Central Park hosted a spectacular concert this time. 500,000 people attended their show. It was one of the biggest U.S. concerts. The gathering raised money and awareness for the park and became a cultural milestone. As the darkness darkened above New York, they played 21 songs, beginning with Mrs. Robinson. It received rave reviews and a global tour, but behind the scenes, everything were falling apart. Garfunkel subsequently claimed performing for such a large crowd was amazing. Simon admitted they didn't talk much during the tour. Despite the screams and adulation, their personal issues remained between them. One of 1983's worst chapters followed. They began working on a new record, Think Too Much, after their Central Park success, but tensions returned. Simon was frustrated with Garfunkel's slow vocal recording. He unexpectedly called Garfunkel to say he was pulling his vocals from the CD. Garfunkel later wondered why Simon would do it. Engineers confirmed that Garfunkel's voice was completely erased from the master tapes. Paul Simon published Hearts and Bones as a solo project in November. Bootlegs shared by die-hard fans preserved Garfunkel's voice, notably a heartbreaking solo on Song About the Moon. A relationship already full of cracks was deepened by the betrayal. Things got worse by 1993. In New York, their reunion performance failed. A critic's review that called Garfunkel one of several stage colleagues offended him. A little comment set it off. The backstage tension became physical. Simon's business manager later said he feared someone would be stabbed if a knife was present. Shoving and yelling were reported, and the crew feared it would spill onto the stage. These fights demonstrated that 20 years later, sorrow and hatred persisted. In fact, they had become stronger. While still fighting the same conflicts they had fought since childhood, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel met at age 11. Queen's schoolboys sang together in junior high performances and on street corners. Back then, they shared music, companionship, and the excitement of performing. Nobody could have imagined their fame or bitterness. With fame came a quiet but powerful anger. Paul Simon was plagued by his height. Even if it sounds minor, it wasn't to him. He remembers a moment decades later when Garfunkel joked, "I'll always be taller than you." Simon never forgot how painful that was. More than a joke. Simon was already insecure and self-doubting. He spent years in treatment focusing on his shortness. What was worse was that Garfunkel seemed to know. He acknowledged in a later interview that he befriended Simon as a child out of empathy for his height. He stated he gave Paul love and friendship as compensation, then added something terrifying. That compensating gesture made a monster. Their height gap symbolized a power imbalance. Although Paul penned and Artie sang the songs, Garfunkel was often the star. Despite the songs being his, their manager stated Paul often felt overshadowed when audiences clapped for Artie's vocals. Their history bound them despite the conflict. By 1970, they were global stars after recording a $25 single in 1957. That voyage was rare and stressful. Simon called Garfunkel his oldest buddy in a recent documentary and admitted stardom had taken its toll. Still, cracks appeared early. Simon recorded solo material in 1958, just after their first hit, without telling Garfunkel. The betrayal never healed. Garfunkel still expressed disbelief and hurt that Simon kept it a secret 60 years later. Not only business drove their split. Personal, messy, emotional, and full of unresolved anguish.